familiar, I'm sure, with their annual report, but there's a new report that's just out this week, right? Okay. All right. So let's, and I think that Senator Watson is going to pop in maybe 12:30, and we'll see if we can sort of squeeze her in. Yeah.
I do just want to add, we've got some pages and some youth in the room today. So yeah, come on in for Climate Solutions Caucus. So we do just want to thank them for coming and participating.
Yes.
Thank you, Pages.
Thank you, Pages. You're
And
very,
please feel free to get more pizza, whatever you need. So that's all I had to say.
Pages are a very important part of our process.
Yeah.
Okay. So how about if we start with everything you think?
Great. Hi, everybody. I don't know everybody in the room. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester, and I'm the chair of the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee, which is newly reconstituted. We're back after a one biennium hiatus. And so it's been a really interesting year in our committee because we have had a ton of just knowledge building and, 101 type testimony to take. And we've been doing that. So they'd asked us to talk a little bit about what we've been up to in our committee and, what we've been doing and not doing. I guess just to state the obvious, folks here probably know that a series of bills to repeal some of the pillars of our climate approach here in Vermont have been introduced to my committee, and we have not moved those forward. That just comes not only obviously for the strong support, I believe, that exists in the legislature and certainly in our Democratic caucus for climate work and for protecting those bills, but also from a belief that repealing, in other words, knocking us backwards and repealing these important bills isn't any kind of a starting place for a thoughtful path forward. And so I come at that from two points of view. One is, would there even be support across the legislature broadly for repealing these important bills? I think the answer to that, based on my long experience here, is no. But more importantly, how do we move forward in a thoughtful way to find solutions that basically make Vermont more affordable for all of us, while keeping our energy goals in mind? And so again, I don't think repeal that's not the answer. So one thing that we talk a lot about in our committee, and I really think that it's an important way for all of us to think about our climate work, is, we measure our climate progress, kind of up here in the atmosphere, literally, at the level of greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And that is the statistical metric that we use, and it makes a lot of sense. It's how we quantify whether we're making progress on climate action. But in some ways it becomes, I feel like it becomes a little bit of a blind alley for our conversations, because it sets up the expectation that that is the only important goal. So greenhouse gas reductions, greenhouse gas emissions, obviously that is what is harming our environment, harming our planet, creating cycles of flooding and severe weather here in Vermont, damaging our maple sugaring industry. I mean, we know all the damage that it's causing. And while we measure it in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, what I really hope that we can all remain focused on is, how do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions reductions? Well, we do it through very important, meaningful work that helps one Vermonter at a time, one home at a time, one household at a time, to save money on their energy bills and move to a more sustainable future. And that is the work that really, really, really matters. And I like to talk about climate work sometimes almost only in that framework, because that's how we help people. And that's how we help people get to a more sustainable and more affordable future. And there are upfront costs involved always with getting people over that hump. It's the most vulnerable among us. It's low-income Vermonters. It is rural Vermonters who cannot afford to weatherize their home, who cannot afford to put in advanced wood pellet heating, who cannot afford an EV. If we can help folks get over that hurdle, then we have helped people get to a future that's sustainable because they are saving hundreds of dollars every month on fossil fuel prices. And so I'm sorry for that philosophical thing, but you asked what our committee has been doing. Well, that is literally what we have been doing. And it's also where you take the values, when you think about a values ladder and how we walk ourselves up to the very top of that values ladder and we get to a point where we don't agree with each other. When you walk yourself back down the ladder, where do we get to a point where we all agree? So we've been taking a lot of testimony on weatherization.
Beautiful.
Because that is a shared value, I think, across parties and across communities, helping Vermonters weatherize their homes. That matters. Everybody can see why that's so important. And so we've been taking a ton of testimony lately on weatherization, learning about who's doing it, how much it costs, who benefits, how people benefit, what the costs are, what the long-term savings are, what the barriers are, and how it's being funded. And so one thing I'm thinking about a lot is that we've spent a lot of federal funds basically have enabled a lot of weatherization work. As we start to see a cliff for those funds, how do we make sure here in Vermont that we're able to keep funding weatherization? We've built up a workforce. We have people who are increasingly understanding how beneficial it is. How do we make sure that we can keep up the momentum on weatherization and not go backwards? So we've been doing a lot of work on weatherization, sort of laying the groundwork maybe for next year. We did pass a solar bill. Yay. It's on its way over to the Senate. And it's a really narrow bill, honestly. It basically will make it easier for Vermonters who want to put a ground-mounted solar array on their property, so in their backyard or in the field right next to their home, how they can put in a more powerful array and still benefit from this expedited registration process that the PUC has. So we took a ton of testimony on that. The reason we took a lot of testimony is that, one, energy policy is really complicated, but two, it was really important to me to try to get that bill out of our committee with tripartisan support. And so we spent a lot of time getting to a unanimous vote, and we did that.
So,
Right.
like, seriously.
Yeah, no, it was,
It was the year I didn't think we were gonna get anything. So,
Yeah.
like,
it was important to everyone, I think, in that room to come to agreement. And so we gave up some things, I gave up some things, and we passed a good solar bill. So when was I supposed to stop talking? Am I done?
You've got about 5, you have like 3 to 5 minutes left.
Great.
And then we got Scott. Look, hey, Scott, yay, we're thinking about you.
Yeah. So oof, I won't even talk about that right now. So I've been thinking a lot about advanced clean cars too, and advanced clean trucks. And while that bill is not in our committee right now, I have been thinking about it a lot and talking to a lot of folks about it and trying to find a path forward for that. And I guess my strong message on that is, if, and I know in this room that there are, a wide variety of perspectives, ranging from folks who strongly believe that we don't need to take any action on clean cars and clean trucks at all, that we should really hold the line there and not shift anything. And there's a very super strong case to be made for that. Yes, and the most important thing that matters to me is that should the Agency of Natural Resources or the dealers and manufacturers feel that some sort of limited compliance relief is necessary, I'm going to argue until I'm blue in the face that the legislature is an extremely inappropriate and unnecessary place for that conversation to be playing out. And I feel that the furor over it in the State House right now is, essentially lobbyist fueled. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but these programs were adopted by rule. The Agency of Natural Resources adopted these programs. I strongly support them. I'm very glad they adopted these programs. And Massachusetts and Maryland, blue states, for anybody in the room who cares, have recently and very effectively announced compliance delays and some relief, some flexibility on these programs by executive order or by basically a letter or a memo announced by their version of the ANR. And in my opinion, it is simpler, it's quicker, it's easier. If ANR, would like to provide a little bit of compliance relief on this, it's easy for them to do without getting into what often turns into the thicket and the bogs and the quicksand of the legislature. And so I just want folks to understand that we have a ledge council memo. I've engaged in multiple conversations to make sure that I was on solid ground in saying if this is a path we need to take, or if a path that in a very limited view, a narrow band of maybe heavy duty trucks would be helpful, do it. Because things get complicated in the legislature and you don't always get the results you're looking for. Done.
Wow.
Thank you, Representative Davis. Click, done. And thank you for your great work and for stepping up into the leadership role that you have.
Yes, ma'am.
You got not an unwieldy committee, but certainly a very dynamic committee.
It is.
You're doing an awesome job.
Do we have any specific, for a couple minutes, specific question for Representative James?
Mike?
Thanks, Kat, for all you've been doing.
Yeah.
In House appropriations, we've been trying to look at what gets federal funded and what the prospects are. There's been a flood of information. I'm not sure if I remember correctly, but I think we heard that the offices that service LIHEAP in DC have been shut down.
Yes, a bunch of LIHEAP folks were let go. So timely question, LIHEAP is coming in at 2:00 today.
Oh.
To our committee. So if anybody wants to tune in, watch it online or whatever, we have LIHEAP coming in today at 2 or 2:30? 3, I'm sorry. Anyway, LIHEAP is coming today. We have taken testimony on a big federal grant program called Solar for All. And Vermont received 42 million. And we haven't, we took testimony on Solar for All, 6 weeks ago, have not heard that anything has changed. But at that point, people were still feeling pretty confident that the Solar for All money would still flow. And I don't know if things change on an hourly basis, but I think Solar for All is still okay.
That's really helpful.
Anybody else?
Wow. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
A font of information and philosophical blabbering.
Okay, so now.
This is your intro music, Jared.
I should be coming down from the ceiling.
So now we have Jared Duvall, who has done so much work to inform and enlighten us on emissions and where they're coming from and how we deal with them and these wonderful reports. So now let's hear about your new report.
Thank you, Representative Burke. Thanks, everyone. Really glad to be with you today. Thanks for the invitation. For those who I don't know, my name is Jared Duvall. I serve as Executive Director of Energy Action Network, which is a small, independent, nonprofit organization that does a lot of data tracking, research, and analysis in the emissions and energy space. And we just released yesterday a new research paper with the long title there on the right, looking at the latest data from the tax department to understand what's happening with statewide fossil fuel sales and what that means for the Vermont economy, Vermont consumers, and emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in the state. So I will actually be in House Energy and Digital Infrastructure
Tomorrow.
to provide a longer presentation on this. And we're also doing an hour-long lunchtime webinar next Thursday, May 8th, for anybody who may want to join for that. But for now, going to give a sneak preview of some of the key findings. But if you want to read the full thing, if you go to our website, eanvt.org, and then look under research and reports, it's the first thing that pops up. But yeah, Jordan, if you don't mind advancing.
Yeah. Let's, and you, Jared, this just started and you have time to wait until he's finished? Or do you need to rush off right away?
Oh, should circle back another time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no worries.
Okay,
Hopefully this is the correct pizza too.
okay.
So for context, since 2017, the tax department has been collecting data on the volumes of fossil heating fuels sold, fuel oil, propane, and then we get fossil gas or natural gas data from VGS. And the tax department has for a long time collected fuel sales volumes in the transportation sector, gasoline and diesel. And so we're able to combine all of those sales to get a statewide look at fossil fuel consumption and sales. And what we know is that since 2017, here's the good news. Overall, statewide fossil fuel consumption has been trending downward. The caveat there is that it's been slightly and slowly, and it's been due in large part to the investments that have come via federal funding that is now either going away or facing uncertainty, as Representative James said. Some other good news is that Vermont's climate pollution has been trending downward. The Global Warming Solutions Act set 2005 as our first baseline year. And since that year, we've seen EIN is estimating, based on the latest data, somewhere between a 16 and 21% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions as of 2024. And a lot of these reductions in fossil fuel use, reductions in climate pollution, reductions in energy costs that are happening, as I'll get to, is thanks to the thousands of Vermonters who are proactively taking steps to adopt energy saving, pollution cutting, often energy cost saving solutions, including as of the end of 2024, registering nearly 18,000 electric vehicles, comprehensively weatherizing over 40,000 homes, and installing over 20,000 heat pump water heaters and over 70,000 cold climate heat pump units. This is important progress that's making a difference. So that's the first part of the good news. Next slide. And more good news is that there is still a lot of untapped opportunity to continue lowering energy bills, to lead to greater price stability, and to reduce fossil fuel use and pollution even more by even further advancing these solutions, increasing the accessibility and adoption of weatherization, electric vehicles, heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, advanced wood heating systems, these proven solutions that can deliver that win-win-win of cutting pollution while cutting costs and while improving health. Next slide, please. But unfortunately, there is some not so good news. And that includes that 2024 was the third year in a row that statewide fossil fuel costs exceeded $2 billion. And if you adjust that for inflation and put it in 2024 dollars, in every year except 2017, except 2020, statewide fossil fuel costs have been over $2 billion. Bringing that down to a personal or a household level, it means that Vermonters are seeing a lot of price volatility in their energy costs and household budgets. I'll get to a graph that shows this more clearly, but just looking at 21 to 22, there was a 38% cost increase in fossil fuels. And that faced us as a state, and it faced households as well. If you just compare the low year to the high year 2 years later, 2020 to 2022, we saw more than $1 billion cost increase to Vermont because of our exposure to these price volatile fossil fuels and our dependence on them. And that translated to nearly a cost increase of nearly $1,800 for each and every Vermonter in just 2 years. Next slide, please. More bad news, this is on the emissions side, is that based on this data, we are now confidently able to say that Vermont did not meet the first emissions reduction deadline of the Global Warming Solutions Act. That deadline is January 1st of 2025, which means 2024 annual emissions is what we're looking at for that compliance. So when we did our best estimate based on the latest available data, we are estimating that as a state, we fell about 18 to 39% short of the first emissions reduction obligation of the Global Warming Solutions Act.
That's worse than I thought. Okay.
Next slide. The fossil fuel data goes through 2024. We don't have electricity sales data for 2024 yet. So this is the most recent year, 2023, in which we can have a total energy cost look for the entire state. About $3.3 billion in energy costs. You see over $2 billion of that was fossil fuels. If you want to see how it breaks down by fuel type, that's why we created that graph. Or pie chart or donut chart or bagel chart, depending on your breakfast
Okay, so
choice.
so the green is transportation, thermal, and then electricity. Wait, you said you don't have electricity fully?
We don't have it for 2024, which is why this is only showing 2023. But we do have the fossil fuels data for 2024. So we were able to create this next graph, and this really shows the effect of the price volatility. So that gray line at the top is our total statewide fossil fuel consumption measured in trillion BTUs. You see there was a dip in 2020, but since then it's been relatively flat. But the costs facing Vermonters have not been relatively flat. You see that they increased by over $1 billion comparing 2020 to 2022. And look how steep that increase in total fossil fuel costs was between those 2 years. And it has leveled off some, but again, still over $2 billion in statewide fossil fuel costs as of 2024. And those stacked bars allow you to see how much different fuels contribute to those overall costs. Next slide, please. This is what it translates to on an individual level. Now, of course, all over the state, different Vermonters are in different situations depending on how they heat their homes, how they travel, how big their house is. But this is an example for an average Vermont household that heats with fuel oil, that has 2 gas vehicles. And, using average numbers, a household in that situation would have seen that increase that you see from 21 to 2022 of about $5,800 in costs to about $8,300 in costs. So about $2,500 roughly more in costs between 21 and 22.
Yes, are these numbers adjusted for inflation?
These are the numbers in those years. They're nominal dollars. We also have graphs that will adjust them for inflation. And it's relatively the same story because it's a shorter time span. The effect of inflation shows up more over longer time spans, but it's compressed a little bit. But we can produce those as well.
Looks like Representative James is.
Yeah. Jared, I was just reading the fine print. So average energy costs, example, Vermont household. So that's 2 gas cars and a fuel oil furnace. Okay. Do you have slides that show those costs for homes? I don't know if it's possible to get this or quantify, but homes that have, an EV and heat pumps or homes that are weatherized, or how could, I'd be curious to know how that stacks up, because one of my ongoing, not with you guys, in the broader landscape of conversations about energy work, I feel like we fall into the pit of focusing only on costs.
Yes.
And we have a really hard time moving the conversation to, yes, here are the costs and here are the savings.
So there, I don't think it's the next slide, but I do have some slides that will speak directly to that. You can keep going. Sorry, thanks, Jordan. I'll tell you when to stop. So here, please. So this allows you to see the difference based on, so depending on how a home or a building is heated, these are the different costs that those fuels would have been over the last 5 years. And you can see the increased volatility and the overall higher costs for propane and fuel oil as compared to heat pumps, wood pellet furnaces, and fossil gas furnaces.
Fossil gas, like natural gas?
Natural.
Mhm.
Okay.
Utility gas, yeah, it's all the same.
Jared,
Yes.
what did you use for an electricity rate?
That's the statewide average.
What's the state? Does it show?
Yeah. So that's a great point, Representative Torrey, that the costs and savings will depend based on your utility territory and what your electric rate is. That's the statewide average. And I think we have some more on that I'll get to. Yeah.
So in terms of the heat pump, like in my house, I have solar panels on my roof and I have a heat pump. So I had to pay to install the heat pump, but I'm not really paying very much except for taxes on the electricity.
Yes.
Is that accounted for? I mean, it looks like on this, it looks like the heat pump would be more expensive than the gas furnace, but in my case, it's definitely not.
That's a good point. So this is not accounting for folks who might be in a net metering situation where your electricity bill is lower. This is assuming that you're paying for the full cost of that electricity at an average residential statewide rate. Maybe we can go back, Jordan, just to one more. So, this is just like if you're putting yourself, you don't have to put yourself. Many of you probably experienced this yourself. Like, this is what we don't get a total energy bill. It's, we see it, a couple times a season. If you're on a heating fuel, you see it, every week or two if you're still driving a gas vehicle. But this is what total annual fossil fuel costs would have, how they would have changed in those 2 years. So really significant change and burden. And you can see, next slide, please,
I
Jordan.
do just want to say, I think this is in part why we've had so much pushback on any of our thermal work, is people are experiencing costs going up and they're so frightened at the idea of another thing making that cost go up. That I think that fear is kind of baked into people's reactions.
Even when the policy goal is to get off of that roller coaster.
The fear of that is really borne out in that number. That's wild to see that difference.
Next slide. And so you can really see this volatility. This is, since 2005, prices of gasoline and diesel as compared to electricity on the transportation side. Next slide shows the price volatility of especially fossil fuels like kerosene, propane, and fuel oil. You can see that in the pink, gray, and purple. So it's quite a roller coaster for family and business budgets relying on those fuels. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This has a big impact, not just on family and business budgets, but also on the state economy. Fossil fuels are 100% imported into Vermont. And because so much of the cost of them is related to the wholesale commodity imported product, about, on average, it varies by fuel, but on average, 75 cents of every dollar we spend on fossil fuel leaves the state economy. Whereas with electricity, that ratio gets flipped. And we're seeing much more of our energy dollars stay and recirculate locally because of what is bound up in electricity costs, paying line workers, tree trimming, customer operations, power purchases. A much lower share leaves the Vermont economy than with fossil fuels. Next slide. So this is now transitioning from the economic analysis to the emissions analysis. Based on the fossil fuel sales data that we have through 2024, which is historically more than 70% of our statewide emissions, we were able to calculate using the same data and methodology that ANR uses, the estimated sectoral emissions for transportation and thermal through 2024. Many of you may know that the greenhouse gas inventory and forecast that's published officially by the state, by the Agency of Natural Resources, is usually on like a 3-year delay. So last year, the inventory went through 2021. This spring, they'll publish one that goes through 2022. And the main reason for that is a delay in being able to calculate emissions from the agricultural sector, which the agency uses an EPA tool for which there's about a 3-year delay. But we can almost in real time estimate emissions from our most polluting sectors. And then we can make estimates based on recent history of what may be happening in the other sectors. So we calculated the expected emissions for those 2 biggest sectors, transportation and thermal. And then we looked at the range of what emissions have been in every other sector over the past 4 years to give us a band of the highest and lowest potential or a plausible band for the high and low emissions from those sectors, and added it up. And the first target of the Global Warming Solutions Act, January 1st, 2025, was an obligation to it's science-based, reduce emissions down to 7.3 million metric tons. Our analysis of this latest available data results in an estimate in that range that you see on the left, somewhere between 7.75 and 8.29 million metric tons, which again translates to falling about 18 to 39% short of that first legal requirement.
So the fossil fuel industry is doing it. That's the only one that actually happens to be, and electricity seem to be.
The fossil fuel industry is an interesting one. That's the official title in the inventory, but really all that is the estimate of fugitive emissions from our in-state gas pipelines.
Oh, so like when there's a leak.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess that's good.
So that one doesn't move very much, and it's generally been very low.
Well, this is a bummer.
Next slide. We've also done reports. The next to last report that we did looks at Vermont in a national, global, and regional context with our emissions. We have seen progress since 2005. You can see we've gone down from about 15.9 tons of climate pollution per person to 12.8. But we're now the highest in New England, more than twice the global average, but significantly less than the US average. But that accounts for a reduction that's the lowest in New England since 2005 in percentage terms. Next slide.
And we're going to ask you to wrap up in like 2 minutes.
Yep. So this just helps us see the pace of adoption of these key climate solutions that are helping us make progress. Not as much as or as fast as we would want, and you can see the different kind of adoption rates there. Next slide. And you can see we host on our website statewide dashboards for emissions and some of these key adoption of key energy solutions. So you can see year by year heat pump water heaters. You can look at that at a county level, at a town level, however you want to, whatever lens you want to look through. And then we have in the middle there showing kind of a progress tracker relative how that compares to the targets that were set in the climate action plan. Next slide. So this is weatherization. Next slide. I know I'm going through this quickly, but time is short and it's all available on our website. This is
You're going to give a longer presentation, your moments.
Energy and digital infrastructure,
Next slide.
where it's all happening.
And this is just for the folks who really want to just look at the data. This is the data from the tax department. And there's also interesting things happening here. I spoke broadly about overall what's happening with fossil fuel use, but there's interesting changes happening by fuel type. We see that even though overall fossil heating fuel sales are a little bit down, they're significantly down for fuel oil, but they're actually going up for propane. And we have a paper that looks at some of the reasons for that. And then the next slide shows the totals for gasoline and diesel. So
Great, thank you so much. This is clear. As we consider different policies to sort of have this real clear data. I want to make opportunities for Senator Watson to talk to us too, as the important chair of an important committee working on these issues as well. So
You're good. I'll stand right here.
you want to come up here?
No, this is great.
Okay.
So just want to keep everybody up to date on what is happening, right now. I mentioned earlier, I've got a lot on my plate. Now that I've had some food. So, we have the budget up for third reading today, in the Senate, and we know that there are going to be multiple attempts to amend the budget, amendments put forward by Senator Beck, to do basically three things. So one is to remove the private right of action in the Global Warming Solutions Act. Second is repeal the clean heat standard, and the third is what is that?
I don't think he has the third.
Well, I think the third is coming. The third is to delay the enforcement of the clean cars and trucks rules by 2 years. So he did walk through those, well, at least that last one, he walked through. It's been a little complicated because they've changed, but we basically walked through them in committee. And so.
In appropriations?
Nope. Well, actually, we did walk through some version of it in appropriations. Did not include that last part about clean cars and trucks.
Okay.
But we did walk through them more completely in Senate Natural Resources and Energy. So anticipating that today is going to be somewhat exciting. It's at this point not a secret that we'll be offering a substitute amendment so that we don't end up with all of those shenanigans. So that is the point.
Well, thank you, Senator Watson. And can I just say thank you to all the advocates who have been working on this? I don't know about you, but I have received a flurry of constituent notes, and I heard from the Sergeant at Arms that they had over 600 contacts as of yesterday related to don't vote for Scott Beck's amendments. The confusing part for us has been, what are those amendments? So can you just clarify for us? So we have a Global Warming Solutions Act repeal that you reviewed in Natural Resources.
It's repealing the private right of action.
Okay, and your committee has voted on that?
We did not get a chance to take a position on that part, nor the repeal of the clean heat standard. We did take a position on that last part about delaying the enforcement of clean cars and trucks by 2 years, and we voted 3-2 to not do that.
Great, okay, cool. And so you can expect this on the House side at some point. We don't know when, but you can watch in less than one.
That there may be a possible happening today.
Well, let's stick together on this, hold the line.